Hi, I'm Bobby Kimbrough, and welcome to Off the Cuffs again. I'm very excited today. We have Michael Hennessey with us.
Yes, sir.
Today is going to be a very interesting conversation. What I always like to do when we have guests here is tell us about yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, how you arrived here, because I'm excited about some of the questions that I have, and I'm sure you have for me. So once again, welcome to Off the Cuffs and welcome to the
Absolutely.
Sheriff's Office.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir.
So I think I grew up in Connecticut originally, and it's funny because I have both of my mom's older brothers are in law enforcement. They're both officers up in Connecticut, and then I have a second cousin who is as well. So growing up, I really idolized them and saw the hours that they were working, and were listening to some of the stories that they could tell me. And I wanted to be an officer when I was younger.
Really?
And yeah, what actually happened was, we were pretty close to New York City, and then 9/11 happened. And I remember my Uncle Doug had to go there in kind of the aftermath.
Right.
And then months go by, and we're on family vacation in, I think it was Vermont. And I was talking to his daughters, my cousins, Sydney and Melissa, and they were telling me how much of a toll that took on them with him having to go. And obviously there was so much of the unknown after all of that happened. And it put a lot of stress on them, and they kind of pushed me away from that. So I always had kind of that respect for law enforcement, still do, obviously. But that made me think about other fields that I could go into. And then I got really big into video when I was younger, went to school in Vermont, and then they pushed me towards the on-camera side of it. So then fast forward to December 2012, graduate from college, start looking for jobs. Found my first job on the coast in Greenville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Met my wife there, and she was from Greensboro. So we both, after about a year and a half there, made the transition to Fox 8, and we've been there since. That was May of 14.
Yeah.
So I spent my first 5 years in the bureau here. I was the bureau chief in Winston-Salem.
Wow.
So I was by myself, primarily with one other photographer, which is unique because you have a lot to focus on. It's not just Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. It's everything west and north and all that.
Right.
So there's a lot of subject matter, but it's also a lot of competition because you're going up against full stations that have dominated here for a long time. So you kind of cut your teeth doing that. And then in May of this past year, 2019, it's weird, it's 2020 now. We started the 11 o'clock newscast for Fox 8, and I took over that as the anchor. It's a solo anchor show. So it's nice because I have a little bit more time to work on stories, whereas when I was in Winston, it was whatever news of the day for the most part. So we get to do kind of the stuff that I got into journalism for, which is the more in-depth stuff, which is the stuff that really affects people on a larger scale and not just your kind of petty crime type stuff that we seem to see in the news a lot more nowadays than we used to. So I've always had a pretty good working relationship with everybody that I've covered here, and that's helped me kind of as I've made this transition, and your office included. That's how it's always been. So
well, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come by and chat with us.
Of course.
You know, when they told me that you were coming, I was excited because, you know, it's oftentimes I get a chance to talk with someone in the media profession. It's usually they're talking to us, interviewing us. Mm-hmm. But you said something as you were talking about the influence or the story of the day. Mm. And when we talk about media relationships, we talk about how the media shapes our community, how you spin a story. As a young boy growing up, I always had this thing about, are they going to get the story right? Are they going to tell it from their side? Are they selling newspapers? Or are they selling it for viewers? Mm. Are they going to tell the exact story? So when I talk to a lot of my friends in law enforcement, they always say, well, which story are they going to tell? So when you tell a story or the media gets involved, tell me the angles that you're looking at. Are you telling an in-depth story? Or are you trying to sway, get a message across? I've often wondered that.
When you talk about a spin.
Exactly. I wanted you to say that word.
I try to never put a spin on anything. The big thing is you get the facts and you portray them to the public. And of course, there are certain times where, as you know, we may know something that can't be released,
right,
or make kind of put the pieces together, and as you guys do in investigations, which you can then take it a step further and go about it that route. But it's never a spin for us. It's never that we're trying to sway people one way or the next. And don't get me wrong, I mean, you do see that, especially on the national level, of course, but that's what is kind of beautiful about local news is you can just put the facts out there and let people form their own opinions. I always tell people I'm not allowed to have opinions, and I kind of like thinking about it that way, you know. So it's really like, let's say we have a scene and you guys respond to whatever it may be, if it's a chase or something like that. It's really just getting the facts, and I know Christina Howell, your public information officer, deals with me a lot. I had called her the other night at 10 o'clock at night, felt bad about that, but we're getting all these phone calls from people and these emails wondering what's going on. This is a quiet neighborhood. We've got deputies out here surrounding this truck for the last hour and a half, you know, and of course it can be any scenario in our heads. We've seen most of it, as you guys of course have. But it's just, it's even if I just tell her sometimes, like, just give me the basics, you know, and we'll worry about the rest later.
Gotcha.
And a lot of the times it's that's the only thing you guys can do, because you don't know sometimes what's exactly going on. And I'm not going to sit here and force you. And I'm not going to tell you that all media is this way. And I'll meet with fire departments and different police departments and all that kind of stuff. And I tell them it's the same thing that you hear about law enforcement. 99% of law enforcement is good people, but you've got the bad egg in there somewhere. And I've heard horror stories with different departments dealing with certain media members, and maybe they are trying to put a spin on things. Maybe they are trying to force them into saying something. And of course there are those gotcha moments, you know, where you realize that somebody's not being completely truthful or whatever it may be. But I haven't really had too many of those, especially not in law enforcement.
Well, I can honestly say that, you know, for the most part, not even for the most part, since I've been here, all of the media outlets, print, whether it's print, television, have been extremely kind and nice and fair with us. And I've always told them, and when I talk to them, thank you for how you have treated us and how you have depicted us. We're grateful for that. But when I look at media, I look at the power of media. I'm always looking behind the curtain. I'm always looking at the influence and the power of media, because media shapes a culture. You have the ability, when you sit at the desk and you tell a story, you have the ability, whether or not you give an opinion or not, you have the ability, depending on where you depict the story, to sway people, whether the words are spoken or unspoken. So oftentimes, I wonder sometimes, you know, what type of angles are you looking for when you come to a story? Because, you know, some stories attract more viewers than just, let's say, the guy who ran off the side of the road versus the guy, as you said, surrounded by vehicles, a hostage negotiation. I mean, what angles do you look for when you approach a story? What are you hoping to gain? Just to gather information and put it out to the public, or is there a certain type of things that the media looks for when they're looking at a story? Big thing is
the truth, you know, and we do it to impact people's lives in a positive way, and to create more knowledge on their part, you know, and keep them aware of what's going on. I mean, yes, it is, the media certainly has a large reach, but it's a lot of responsibility at the same time. And you think about, I guess, in terms of like an investigation,
right?
When you guys have all of these tips coming in, and you may know that there's a good chance that somebody did something, but you have to act within the confines of the law. You can't just go up and arrest somebody, because then they're going to come back, and if you can't prosecute, then you're going to get sued or whatever it may be, you know? So the big thing for us is always telling the truth, and we have to be very careful with how we, I guess, put, like you were saying, the language out there. And that's something that when there are major stories, I mean, we'll sit down and we talk about that kind of stuff.
Really?
Either saying things, not necessarily certain ways, because there's a right way to say it and a wrong way to say it, but.
So you actually have a briefing before you guys put the story out?
I wouldn't call it a briefing, but yeah, there's always discussions, newsroom discussions. You know, we'll have our producers, it'll be 9:30, and we'll get a press release come in or something like that. And you need to talk about what you should, like, morally put in there and what you shouldn't. Some perfect example is, let's say there's a minor arrested for having a weapon in school or something like that.
I got you.
We a lot of the times have the discussion, do we want to include this kid's name in here, even though you guys may have put it in the press release? Like, at what level do we put this kid who has his entire life ahead of him, put his name out there for the public to see and know that he did it? I mean, is it really helping? And then at the same time, victims of crimes. A lot of times press releases have the victims' names in there.
So,
we're not going to put the victim's name out there.
You just went up another
sometimes.
notch in my book, man. You actually have a conversation. That's
yeah,
good stuff.
Absolutely.
So you actually have meaningful conversations as, should we, the value of it, what are we going to gain by doing this?
What's the public going to gain? It's not about us. I mean, we know it already, It's not a matter of if it's going to help us by putting it out there. It's what does the public need to know, and who are we hurting, I guess, for the sake of letting the public know what's out there. And you'll see that sometimes we won't put a name out there, a victim's name, but then maybe another media outlet does. And then everybody kind of gets looped into this, well, you put my name out there, if you go try to talk to those victims.
When I first came in office and I was going through this discussion about a decision that I made, and part of the story was always the same thing, and it was never the entire story. And I said, why is it that they won't tell the entire story to give people the true understanding as to why a decision was made versus snippets of the story? And I became frustrated at times about why is that? And so I guess a lot of it has to do with time consumption, how much time you got, and a lot of other things. But I appreciate what you just said when you said you actually give thought, because I often wondered that sometimes, are they really going to give this some thought before they push this information out to the public? Because what I have learned in my 50 plus years of living is that information is powerful, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. Information has abilities to sway and move people in strange ways, depending on where it's coming from and the credibility that they give to the source or the person that's giving that information. And so I've always been looked at media and looked at media outlets with a stronger eye, saying, you have the ability to shape cultures. You have the ability to bring people together, because you'll reach more people tonight when you go on the air than I'll ever reach in a year's time. And so, but how many people do you guys reach out in your broadcasting?
It depends on any given night, and potentially hundreds of thousands.
See, so you touching hundreds of thousands of people in a matter of 10 to 15 minutes. That's powerful. So I appreciate what you just said about you give that conversation, because information could be reckless and it changes and it divides us. And as you know, most people look about what's going on in the country, whether you agree or disagree. I won't have that conversation. But I think that is how we spin things, how we come together. I would love a media outlet that had a conversation, can we just talk, rather than me giving you, can we just talk? And I think when we decided to put this podcast together, it was based on the premise of, can we just talk about our differences? Can we give you the full story? Can we give you information? And you decide, I often make the comment about opinions are like hearts. For the most part, everybody got one, a good heart, bad heart, indifferent, right? Everybody has an opinion about something, whether they're wrong, right. And so when we talk about the media, I've said this on many occasions, the media is one of the most powerful entities in our society. The media can break you, harm you, it can empower you, it can change your life depending on how that information is perceived. And so what I want to ask you next is, what do you think when you think about law enforcement and the media? Do you think that's a good mix? It could be better. What do you think about when you think about law enforcement and the media?
I think there's room for improvement everywhere, not just with law enforcement and the media, but we have to be partners in that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
You guys have a responsibility, protect and serve, and we have the responsibility to get the right information out there. And if either of us mess up, then we're in trouble. We're not fulfilling what we're what we're here to do. I think that's one of the more important relationships that a news media outlet can have is with law enforcement, because anything can happen at any time. What was that?
You wise beyond your years.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But it's something that, I mean, that kind of gets ingrained in your mind early on, is that, I mean, we're not out to get each other. And maybe I am unique because of my background with my family, like I was telling you earlier and all
Right.
that. But I think for the most part, that's how most media members think
Well, when you said we in this together, I like that, because that right there, that statement alone changes how I respond. In other words, when you make a statement like that, we in this together, to me, that puts a whole spin on what you're going to do, because we in this together. And so if we in this together, we have to figure out how do we best serve the people, because that's at the end of the day, we're serving the people. How do we best serve them? And I often wonder that, because sometimes I have information, everyday information comes across my desk, and I have to decide as, what do I want to do with it? You know, who do I tell? Who do I share? Do I share it with the public? Do you share it? Is it information that is ready for public consumption all the time? And so I struggle sometimes, but in the spirit of what we said, what we do is transparency. And a lot of times what I'm finding is transparency sometimes gets you in hot water sometimes, because in full transparency, sometimes people are not ready for full transparency.
Yeah, and it's not only that, it gets back to our working relationship too. It's forming that trust. And when I first came to Winston-Salem, I mean, nobody knows who you are, you know.
Right.
And there are a lot of people that think, and some people that will, if they get their one big break that's going to get them recognized, then they could be out of there when their contract's up in 2 years.
Right.
But you guys you're here still. You know, this is where you're making your home. This is where you're making your long-term career. So I understand why people would be wary to tell the media certain things. But I've kind of gotten to the point, and I would say it was probably around 2 or 3 years in, where I made some really good friends in law enforcement, in other departments, and word gets around that you're not somebody that's going to mess with somebody's life. Right. And sometimes that off-the-record information is what really can, I guess, push you in the direction of, okay, this is a story, or this isn't a story, or it can give you that context, and there's that understanding that, sure, this isn't ready to be out there yet. And I guess another good example is if you find out the identity of somebody that's been killed in a car crash or something like that, or even if you're out there and you're going live and you're just pulling up on scene and you go up to the trooper and you say, has the family been notified yet? And if they say no, that's one of the things where you go and you talk to your photographer. Well, don't show the car, or don't show all of the car. Don't show the license plate, because last thing that you want is some mother to be at home making dinner and see her kid's car mangled on the news and know that it's a fatal accident or something like that, and have them find out from us, whether it's inadvertently or not, as opposed to you guys. Because I know how hard it is to go up and knock on somebody's door and notify them of something like that. I can only imagine what it's like being at home and feeling that shock when you think your kid's 5 minutes away from home, but really they're now in the back of an ambulance or whatever it may be. So that information sharing, it's a fine line, because I never want you guys to get burned by trying to do the right thing. But that off the record stuff, it does help a lot. And sometimes it might be from, well, you're talking to one agency, but it's somebody else's case, and you guys are working it together.
So do you believe? So do you believe that the media has a responsibility?
In everything, yeah, 100%.
So have you seen the movie '96 Olympic Centennial Park? You seen the movie?
No.
That Clint Eastwood did with the bombing in '96 at the Olympics.
Oh, this is the newer one that came out? No, I haven't seen it yet, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I'm going somewhere. So in the storyline, the media drove a lot of information or pushed information out there that caused public opinion to sway one way or another. And then at the end of the day, when it was finally done, it was Rudolph who was responsible for the '96 Olympic bombing down in Centennial. And I remember that so vividly because I was an agent at the time, and I was assigned to Atlanta for the '96 Olympics. They brought all the alphabet agents down to Atlanta to work the Equestrian Park, the MARTA, Centennial, throughout Atlanta. And we were in Atlanta the night that the bomb went off in the park. And a lot of information was coming out from different places, you know, because it was such worldwide news. It was the Olympics, '96 Olympics. And I was looking at the previews of the movie, and when I looked up in my office, I saw the shirt from the shirts that we wore in the Olympics, the white uniform shirts, and I started reflecting on a lot of things that happened that night and happened thereafter. And as I was getting ready to come out and knew that I was meeting you, I looked up and I started thinking about media, how media influences so many things, how media can influence public opinion on a case, public opinion on so many different things. And so that prompted my question about, does the media have a responsibility? Do they have a responsibility to make sure that they vet the information that they put out, rather than saying, okay, we got this from John Doe, so we're going to put it out?
I would say more so than basically anybody else, which is kind of where it comes down to our moral obligation to tell the truth and tell it the right way and not be harming people along the way as you do it. And that's kind of gets back to what you were saying in terms of what you can and can't release, because sometimes you might have a piece of information, but you guys might know that there's something else going on. So you don't want to release one thing and then have us tell it to the public and have the public form the wrong opinion about it, which is why you kind of have to respect the nature of an investigation. And not only that, I mean, even after there are charges filed, I mean, we could wait years and years before we find out the whole story, because you're gonna hear it in court, because the last thing that we want to do is hinder an investigation and have something that we do result in a bad guy or bad person who should be arrested and convicted and put in jail and do something where they get off. I mean, that's on us. That's not on you guys. That's on us. So, and it's something that is learned, and everybody's going to make mistakes along the way. I'm not saying that I haven't made mistakes. I certainly have, but never have I done it on purpose. And it's always something that it's the kind of thing where you make a mistake one time, it's not going to happen again, because you're not going to let it happen.
Right.
Everything's a learning experience when it comes to that kind of stuff.
So give me something that, if you were giving away nuggets, if you were giving away tidbits of information that would help an agency, help someone, entity, as it relates to media relations. If you could give me something.
I mean, I think it is. It's the biggest thing is, and it's not just with you guys, it's with the public as well, is trust and making sure that you're telling people the right things, but also the timeliness of information, because sometimes we're getting completely overwhelmed by phone calls, or maybe it's people up over on the street coming up at a scene and telling us that they heard one thing, whatever it may be. And maybe that information that somebody's telling us about how many gunshots there were or something like that is incorrect, or what was happening with the family dynamic or something of that sort. But if we get that stuff from you guys, then for the most part, we're going to know that it's credible and that it's truthful. And I'm not saying that there haven't been cases where law enforcement hasn't done the wrong thing. I haven't seen it with you guys, and I haven't necessarily experienced it myself here. I mean, you hear about maybe an officer or a deputy or something like that getting arrested for DWI or getting in a wreck while on duty or whatever it may be, and that kind of stuff. But I think what it really comes down to in terms of the media and law enforcement, how you guys should be telling us information is, I mean, I know it's a tough thing, because it all goes back to what you said earlier about what can be released, what can't be released at certain times. So I think it's the information sharing. I think it's timely information sharing, And whether it's calling a press conference or whether it's being accountable for something. I mean, a big example of late is the youth violence, that kind of stuff. And I know you guys are working hard on that, and you guys have taken over the SROs and that kind of thing. But Chief Schultz said it yesterday in High Point. He was talking about how what's troubling is that it's not, the youth aren't just the victims nowadays. They're the ones that are going out and they're the perpetrators. And we talked to Winston-Salem police earlier last year when their murder rates were down. And they talked about a lot of the efforts that they've been doing to get bad guys, violent offenders off the street, maybe even before they can commit the ultimate crimes. But at the same time, it gets back to when you get those guys off the streets, the higher ranking guys off the streets, somebody else is going to rise up.
It's a matter of time.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something that kind of caught us off guard in the media. Was all of a sudden we're halfway through the year last year and we've got 14, 13, 14, 16, 17-year-olds killing each other more than once a month. I mean, sometimes every day. I mean, you look at what happened in High Point on Christmas Eve. Chief Schultz said they weren't in school. You know, they don't have, they're out there waving guns around on the streets and they're killing people. And all of a sudden, not only their victims' lives and their families' lives are ruined, but their own lives are ruined too. So I think it's one of those things where you guys, it's extremely important to be transparent with that kind of stuff in the right way and let us know when you're doing these kind of new efforts, that way we can let people know that it's going on and that those resources are there. Because like you were saying, you can only reach a certain amount of people a day. And going out and doing a neighborhood canvas is going to possibly reach a few dozen people. And then we go on air at night and we tell people about it. But it's not just what we're doing on air nowadays. I mean, we say we're a 24-hour news organization because we have the website and we're on Facebook and we're reaching people all over the world. It's not just in the Piedmont Triad, and it's not just when we're on air. And people can get that information anytime they want. So, and if there's something out there, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier about the amount of time that you have to tell people a story. Mm-hmm. Granted, there are certain stories that are more important than others, and if there's a major thing, then we'll have several people on it. But just for your everyday thing, a lot of times you only have a minute, 30 seconds to tell the story. So you figure out what's most useful to people,
right,
and what people will be kind of most curious about, what's going to help them, and you put that into your minute and a half. And then you push people and say, we have more information on our website. Go ahead and go to our website. And then you have a more in-depth kind of breakdown of where everything is too. So it's a balance for sure, but the last thing that we want to do is leave out a piece of information that we think is very important or add a piece of information that we know shouldn't be out there. And like I said, everybody makes mistakes, but you try and do it the right way. Most of the time you're gonna.
You know, this is pretty cool to be sitting interviewing Michael Hennessey. You know, this is pretty cool. Normally somebody's
It's cool for me too.
Yeah, for some now, so I get to interview you, right?
Yeah.
So look, before we wrap it up, I got a question for you, right? I'm gonna give you a chance to ask me 2 questions, right? And I got one for you.
Okay.
Anything you want to ask us, anything you're curious about, anything you want to ask us, I'll share it with you.
I kind of gets back to what we were talking about. I think you guys have an expanded role when it comes to the youth in our area now, taking over SROs in all of the schools, whereas Winston-Salem Police used to be in some of them. So what would you, I guess, identify as some of the more dangerous things that you guys have been seeing in terms of our youth? Because I remember a couple of years ago, people were saying the opioid epidemic was the biggest threat.
Right.
And now you've got this youth violence, and then you have the tobacco age being raised to 21, and you've got the vaping and all that kind of stuff being thought of as somewhat of an epidemic in its own right. So I guess, what are you guys doing to, in your new role, make sure that you're not missing anything? And what have you learned in, I guess, the short amount of time that you guys have been taking over all of the schools?
Well, what I've learned is that our youth, our students that we have in our schools, they're everyday kids. They need the touch, conversation. someone to let them know they cared about them. They need skill sets. They need to be able to compete in this world that we're talking about. They got to be able to read, write, not just to compete in Winston, but to be able to compete globally. I think that we have a generation that we have lost touch with, and it's not their fault. It's our fault. They're mimicking what we showed them. They're responding to what we gave them. And so while there are young adults, that's a result. What we're seeing is a result of what we've shown them. So the question is, how do we fix that? I think that what I have seen is, and I've been to all the high schools that we have SROs in. Some schools we have more SROs than others. And the approach that we're taking is, while we're there, we're trying to couple that with mentoring. I think a lot of schools need more professional, serious mentorship going on. That is a must. This is not a situation that you can lock away, handcuff away. You can't. This is going to be a situation where you got to have boots on the ground, hands in the school, sweat equity. We can't expect our teachers to teach, be social workers, to be referees, and so many things. We can't expect that from them. That's not even fair. It's not even realistic. So I think that we've got to band together as a community, as a country, and go back, because gangs provide things for kids that sometimes the family don't. It provides shelter sometimes, clothing, money, protection, and a sense of I'm somebody, a sense of power. Everybody wants to feel valued and feel like they have a sense of some power in their lives. And so the problem is that we've got to go back and retool our kids. We've got to go back and show them some things that they can make it beyond here. Because what I'm learning is that some of our young people don't believe that they can rise beyond where they're at. So they exist just where they're at. Just like you were talking about, you took certain people off of the street, or certain gangs or gang members, and then there was a lull in the violence, but then there shortly after, the next person rose up and the cycle continued. Mm-hmm. Well, before that next person rises up and the cycle continues, we need to get in the gap, start doing some mentoring, get in the gap, start doing some hands-on working with the kids and things like that. So that's the approach that we have adopted, is that we're trying to be touch as many lives as we can. A lot of times people say, well, what does that have to do with law enforcement? What does that have to do with sheriffing? And to me, that's what I call prevention. That's prevention. The more people see you out there caring about what's going on, the more people will talk to you. The mantra that we live by is that I can't transform nothing that I'm not a part of. It's very difficult. I got a phone call this morning, just not to get off track, but I got a phone call before you came in. I was talking to a mother, grandmother, as a matter of fact, who called me and said, she said she must have knew who I was, because she called me Bobby, as if she knew me. And she said, Bobby, I need your help. And I said, who am I speaking with? And she told me her name. And I said, hey, how you doing, ma'am? And she basically said, my son is a part of such and such. And he ain't built like that. He ain't built like the kind of kid that's out there on the street trying to be a gangbanger. And he ain't built for jail. He's just being sucked into this by the group or the people that he's hanging around. And she said, would you please do me a favor? Could you reach out to him? Could you talk to him? Would you mentor to him? And so I asked her his name, and lo and behold, what was so strange about that is that I had met the kid on Sunday. I was with one of the guys in town. He and I went out to P.F. Chang, sitting watching the football game. And we were sitting there and we was just talking about the violence and the gangs and just how do you break into that. And he's out there every day in the world working with these kids. And I call on him from time to time, and he said, there's a kid that you got to meet. And lo and behold, the same kid that the grandmother was talking about is the same kid that he introduced me to. And I said, wow, how strange is that? So the approach that we have is how do we change the atmosphere, the landscape? How do we change lives? So that's what we try to do. And so I try to partner with anybody, the media, schools, because it's going to require all hands on deck, all hands on deck.
You just let us know what we can do to help.
So the question I got for you now, you got one. No, you got another question. That was your one. You got another.
You want to rotate, go back and forth? Or you want to be last?
I want to be last. I want to be last.
Well, what I usually do to end interviews is I always ask somebody if they have anything else to add.
Right.
And usually you get the best sound bites out of that. So I guess in the nature of that, what do you think that we're missing, either in the media or in the public? What is happening right now that maybe we are not aware of or not aware of enough?
So there are so many silos throughout this county, right? There's a pocket here that has resources. There's a pocket here. There's a pocket here. We've got to bring all of our resources to the same place and make a strategic effort on what we're doing so that we're not stepping on each other, so that we're not in the way of each other. I think that we're missing something here. You and I have not had this conversation, but I've had this conversation with other media outlets. In certain parts of this county, matter of fact, I had it with the director of health services. There is a 14.5 year differences of people living in one zip code versus people living in another zip code. Why is there a 15-year life difference? That's a generation. And he was explaining that a lot of that has to do with access to the system, illiteracy, food deserts, and things like that. All of these things contribute to crime. All of these things contribute to the gang population. So what we're missing is that we've got to realize, and you said it best, is that we're in this together. Crime that's happening in Winston eventually has the potential to happen in Bermuda Run. It has the potential to happen in Louisville, Clemens, Kernersville. Crime has no boundary. It doesn't respect boundaries. And so I think that we've got to really have a conversation citywide, countywide, with all of the stakeholders and say, what do you need? What we're trying to do is bring people to the table that have resources and the ability to change lives. Because you're right. You take one, you take two, there's 2, 3 in the pipeline. But if we get in at that elementary level, I would love to be in the elementary schools. I would love to have SROs at the elementary level.
Yeah.
If I had the funding, I would love to do that. Not from a law enforcement perspective, but from a mentoring perspective, to get in and talk with young boys and young men, because there's a population that will relate to you that won't relate to me, and vice versa. And so when you get into these schools and you start mentoring, you got to make sure you got the right mentoring program in there, the right mentor in place to change the landscape. So I would love to do that. I would love, I was sharing with my executive assistant as I was coming out, and when I got off the phone, and she said, you got that look on your face like you're thinking. And she said, what's wrong? I said, I wish I had a magic wand and I had the funding to where I could build or buy a place or building to where I could take on about 15, 20 kids at a time for a year and send them through a program where they lived or where they got up in the morning, and we transported them to school and we brought them back home, and they spent a year with us, not handcuffed, not shackled in terms of a confinement or incarceration. I wish I had the funding or something to be able to do that and the staff to do that. I said, I'd be willing to bet I could change. If you gave me 20 a year, I could change at least 15 of them to where they would go back and be very productive citizens. So, maybe I'll hit the lottery. Maybe I'll go buy me a lottery ticket this weekend and hit the lottery.
What day is it?
Yeah, I guess it's the weekend, so I'm assuming Friday or Saturday. Right? That's when I always hear it come out. The numbers get big, so maybe I'll go buy me a ticket.
There you go.
So listen to this. So if you had the opportunity to leave broadcasting, would you leave?
Would I leave?
Yeah.
I've always said that I'll be in news forever.
So you wouldn't want to leave and come work in law enforcement? It's in your blood. I can tell.
I mean,
can sense that.
I have thought about that.
Really?
But
you still got time. You're a young man.
I know, but it all goes back to kind of that initial conversation too. I mean, I know the risks that you guys take.
Yeah.
And whereas I might be okay with that, maybe my wife wouldn't be, or something like that. And also, it comes down to, like I said, we are on the same team. You guys are out there. You are the boots on the ground, but at the same time, this is and should be a group effort. So I feel like I'm still kind of doing that public servant's work, whereas I'm not walking around with a badge on, I guess. And I love working in news. I mean, it can be extremely stressful. The deadlines that you have to deal with.
You want stress. Come spend a day with you. Want some real stress.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. I'm at the barbershop twice a week, right? My whole hair is gray, right? I'm drinking Mountain Dews. I come in the mornings looking for a Mountain Dew about 7:30. About 9:30, I'm on the second one. This is the third one for the day, right? And the day is not even over. So,
well, I haven't noticed you getting grayer, so that's good.
Oh, that's because I'm in the barbershop twice a week, right? Yeah, my haircut bill is probably about $50 a week, right? Yeah. Just in haircuts, right? So
I enjoy it. I enjoy working in news. I really do.
You?
And
I enjoy this too.
Yeah. I can't see myself, and a lot of people.
I get frustrated. You get frustrated
with what?
With the news, like what you do. I get frustrated, like wishing I could do more.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you see the same stuff every day, and
I don't see this.
You can only do so much, or you see different things every day, whatever it may be. And it's not just here; it's around the country, it's around the world, and you see all these issues, but nobody has the right answer. No individual has the right answer, and which gets back to what you were saying, is it's a collaborative thing.
It has to be.
It's like cities who are trying to improve their economies. You can't work with Winston by itself and High Point by itself and Greensboro by itself. I mean, if groups like that work together, everybody's going to be more profitable.
Yeah.
And it comes down to, it's the same thing with the departments inside of those cities. I mean, sometimes you see stuff where one person knows something, but they're not information sharing.
Right.
And just that one detail can make everything easier on everybody.
Well, that's one of the things that we believe on is best workplace practices. We work with Winston, Kernersville. We sit down. Matter of fact, we was at the chiefs' meetings for Forsyth County this morning, where we bring all of the police chiefs, campus police, Wake Forest, Salem, Forsyth Tech, North Carolina School of the Arts, Salem, Kernersville, Winston, myself, and we sit down and we have conversation. We have breakfast and we talk. So you hit it on the head. It's got to be a collaborative effort. It has to be collaboration. That's the only way you're going to win this.
I've seen you guys in those efforts and the improved efforts of that. And,
oh, yeah.
And that you're having great conversations within, whether it's just you and Chief Thompson or whatever it may be, and you guys come out and you announce these initiatives. They've got the Pastors on Patrol thing coming up.
Yeah.
On, I think it's Thursday, the 9th.
We got the Playground Initiative coming up. So
all this
you're
kind
the first
of stuff.
one heard that. You're the first time I've shared that with a news person.
What's that?
The Playground Initiative.
And what's that going to be?
Huh?
Can you release it yet?
For you, I'll release, because by the time we release this, we'll release it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to hold a press conference a couple weeks from now. I have to give it Ms. Howell, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to do something amazing in the one part of the town. We're going to build a playground. We're going to donate the funding for a playground company to come in and build a playground.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be there to cover it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming by, man.
Anytime.
I really enjoyed you, man.
Anytime.
You're a nice guy, man.
So
your parents did well with you.
Well, I appreciate that.
What, you 28?
Now I'm 32 now.
I missed you by 4, man. I still would have got the prize we was at the fair, because if you're in 5 years, you win. So I would have won.
Well, I always say, once I hit 30, I just kind of forgot about it. So I'm 30 plus at this point. Not that it bothers me getting early.
I got a son older than you, man. My oldest boy is 38.
You've got a few of them.
I do. Mm-hmm. Got 7.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 7 boys, man.
Well, I'm sure you're doing a good job with them too.
They stress me out too, man. They stress me out. I got one that's finally going to graduate from school, right?
Yeah.
He's really been on a career path. of what takes 4 years, he's turning into about 10 years. Seriously, he's turning into about 10 years, right? But he's gonna come out in May, and of course, I got another one that's working over there in Greensboro. My oldest boy is out of the country, some part of the world. Yeah.
Sometimes it just takes some people a little bit longer than others.
As long as you
get there.
You know what? That's what I'm claiming. I told him the other day, boy, you're almost there.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to go in the military. And I said, go somewhere. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm excited for him. But it's good to see young men that believe in the efforts of collaboration, and that it takes all of us to turn this around. That's a strong statement.
Well,
You'll do well.
If your son does go into the military, we thank him, and we thank you for everything you guys do.
I appreciate you.
All right, man.
Yeah.
See you again soon.